It's March here in New York City, and it's been a long, cold winter. A couple of weeks ago, I took my wife and kids to the Bahamas for a week-long vacation, and it was wonderful. It was creamy white sand, clear blue water, looked like Windex, 82 degrees, and lots of chairs. And we went to a small island, which I was told was the island used in the opening shot of Gilligan's Island. I don't know if that's true or if they were yanking my coconuts, but anyway, my wife and I made a conscious decision to leave all of our iPads, iPhones, iTouches, everything at home, and just take our kids and be with them for a week. And it was wonderful. We didn't miss any of those devices. And I know it's very prevalent in the news, the notion of children's attention spans being shortened by all of the instant gratification attendant to these devices. I don't think that's true at all. I think children will always be children. They'll always figure out a way to play and to be nutty and silly. And one of the beautiful things about children is they're so good at getting good at things. And no one is more resilient and more adaptive than artists. We are survivors by nature. And one of the things I love so much about painting is that it is the physical embodiment of anticipation. There is no instant gratification in painting. We plant seeds here that we know will be harvested over there. It takes time to look at a painting. It takes repeated encounters. And the construction of a painting and the experience of a painting are literally and figuratively layer after layer after layer of information that all correspond and all require us to wrap our tentacles around through repeated encounters. And that's why there is such a huge audience for painting. That's why the museums you see are packed with people, I think, for these reasons. And I take my kids to the Metropolitan Museum of Art and I say, do you want to see the original Facebook? And then I show them Portrait of a Man by Hans Memling, one of my favorite paintings. Anyway, back to the Bahamas. One night we ate dinner at a very fancy restaurant called Dune right on the beach. And after dinner, we found a hammock under two palm trees, and we lay there in the warm wind, in the dark, looking at the stars. And for an hour, I just made my kids laugh. And I don't really have any message here other than an appreciation of the raw sweetness of life, of pleasure. And that's kind of what I want to talk about in this episode, is the notion of pleasure vis-a-vis my painting and some of the paintings that I like. I've used the word decorative in these episodes before, not as a pejorative term, but decorative as a very cogent, very complex method of putting together visual material in a way that delights the eye, that frees the eye, creating a feast for the eye, to quote Delacroix. And I've read the word decorative defined as that which resists interpretation. And I would define pleasure as that as well. Pleasure is very hard to talk about. It's very hard to codify. Pleasure simply is. And it just washes over you. And it's certainly a very important component in the work that I make, the notion of pleasure, of trying to create pleasure, visual pleasure. And sometimes I think as a painter, it's important to just immerse yourself in the process. And painting is joy. Painting is pure joy, and it's important just to resign yourself to that, to not analyze, to not think, to just be in the painting, be in the moment, and be with paint. And I find that the older I get and the more that I work, that sometimes when I expect nothing, I can get everything. Transitions are very important in a painting. How do you move the eye from one area to another? I played drums for 25 years, and I tend to think of the application of color in percussive terms. For instance, this cerulean and ultramarine blue combination abutted against this geranium red and orange area. A very tectonic blast of one to another with very little transitional moment in between. Says something very different than an area like this, which is a much softer bending of one color into another, wet and wet. And for this, I tend to reserve a series of brushes that I use only for these transitional moments. And it's important, I think, to only hit it one time and then lift the brush and then move on to a clean brush. As soon as you come down for that second hit, you start to get mud. And I am not one of those painters who avoids mud or dreads creating muddy colors. I spent many, many years when I was learning to paint, I'm still learning to paint, but creating mud, trying to get the complexion and the personality out of muddy colors. And sometimes I find the most beautiful colors are those at the bottom, the muck underneath the brushes in the paint bucket. Transitions are important not only in the painting, but I think to learn about them, I think it's important to observe the transitional moments in your daily life. I don't drive a car very much. We have a car, but I tend to take the subway a lot. And I'm very aware of the moments between the subway stop to my studio. It's a couple of blocks. I'm very careful about observing what's going on, the environment that I'm in. What are the transitions? Are they abrupt? Is it the honking of horns? Is it the dull hum of traffic? You have to live these things and observe them. I think it was Charlie Parker who said that if you don't live it, it won't come out of your horn. Anyway, another transitional idea is to simply let one color dry completely and then come back the next day and do a transitional moment with a color applied freshly on top of that dried color. For instance, the green here is suspended in a glazing medium made of galkyd and linseed oil and applied over a dry area, that kind of barbecuey orange-red color at the bottom, allowing it to gently slip over and become translucent until it blurs into the color below it. A lot of that blurring effect from me comes from, it's an homage to my childhood along the South Carolina rivers when we would fish, and I would be really interested in the way that the sand under my feet would slowly slip under the water and then gradually become darker and darker and darker until you couldn't see the sand anymore at all. I didn't catch very many fish, but I got a lot out of looking at those things. And another transitional suggestion might be to simply use colors that are closer together in the spectrum. For instance, magenta into purple or green into blue. And lately I've been using a lot of grays made of Mars black and zinc white as my transitional moments between, for instance, pink and brown. And that creates a beautiful modulation of one color into another, with creating that beautiful personality in between. So the transitions are critical. They're the modifiers and the adjectives and the adverbs that come between the nouns and the verbs. Those allow the other things to really sing, but the real, to me, the real meat is in the transitions. When I'm lecturing or speaking about my work, one of the most common questions I hear in the Q&A part is, how do you know when you're finished? I hate that question. Who cares? A baker is finished when there's a cupcake. A painter is finished when there's a painting, and you have to trust the painter to know when that moment occurs. I rely on experience. I've been painting for 35 years, and I know when I've reached the completion of the painting. Picasso said a finished painting is a dead painting. And the reason why a lot of contemporary and modern painting appears unfinished is because it's intentional. It requires the consciousness of the viewer to fill in the gaps, to finish the painting. I personally like to leave my paintings a little bit raw, a little unpolished, and unresolved, because I want there to be an emphasis on the artifice of the construction of the painting. I want you to see everything right on the surface, see how the painting is made, feel the brush marks, the stacking of colors. No illusions, no misdirection, everything right there on the surface. And I think by leaving a certain rawness and unfinished, it speaks of a certain truthfulness and honesty, and also a faith in the viewer, in that they can now commit themselves into the physical material of the paint, and then hopefully move beyond that into more of a fictive or narrative or interior experience. It shows a certain amount of faith in the viewer. And I would never ask an airplane mechanic, how do you know when the plane is finished? I just get on the damn plane and trust that they know what the hell they're doing and that it's safe. Trust painters. Painters know when it's finished, and the painting is finished when the gap that separates the internal and the external is as small as possible. I know I'm given to maudlin statements from time to time, but a painting is a lot like the delicate legs of a butterfly. It lands on this petal over here, which is the external, then it moves over to this petal over here, which is the internal. Back and forth, without us ever even knowing. So delicate, so fugitive, and that to me is when the painting is finished. When I've constructed something that enables that little dance back and forth from inside to outside and back and forth again. My first solo show in New York City was in 1993, and those paintings, called the River paintings, were very much inspired by Tiepolo's ceiling frescoes, with those swirling vortices of space, that beautiful blue and pink combination, and with the information, the paint being compressed up against the edges, creating a beautiful sense of disorientation, which for me was an amalgam of my interest in liquid, in water, and in the rivers where I come from, and also in the possibility of using the entire picture plane to suggest the transition from the outside world to the inside world. Although Paul Cézanne is often referred to as the father of modern painting, I've always believed that the seeds of modern painting lie in the paintings of Giovanni Battista Tiepolo, the 18th century Venetian painter, whom I love. And I've always been interested in artists who sit at the end of one epoch and the beginning of another, who occupy that transition between one mode and another. Richard Strauss might be another good example in music. And I believe that one of the hallmarks of a great painter is one who possesses more technical ability than they actually use, one who holds facilities in reserve. And in Tiepolo, between the beautiful dancing quality in his lines and the blue-eyed poetry in his colors, his paintings appear effortless, as if they just came into being. And I always talk about the importance of doing first and thinking second, but it's important to remember that painting itself is its own form of thought. So in Tiepolo, by appearing effortless, one might sense that he's not thinking at all, which in a way creates a layer of protection which allows him to continue thinking without outside intrusion. It's so fascinating to me. And in Tiepolo, we see a painter not of stuff, but a painter of conditions, and which is something that continues into Turner, into Eugene Boudin, even into Kiefer, the idea of conditions. In Tiepolo, it's the beautiful torqued space, his treatment of the female face, and the loose handling of his paint, I think, test the image-object relationship. And are we looking into something, or are we looking at something, or is it both at the same time? And one of the brilliant things I think Tiepolo does in terms of color, he models his figures using traditional light and shadow, but instead of using value-based systems, which comes from Da Vinci, of light and dark, he'll replace those with two colors of matching intensity, but different hue, a red next to a green of the same intensity, the red being the light, the green being the shadow, which for me creates a very subtle detonation of flatness, which starts to flatten out the space, creating somewhat of a more overall impression in the construction of the image. A full 150 years before Cubism. And to me, the marriage of illusory space with the technical facility, with the gesture, and with the surface qualities found in Tiepolo, I think it suggests a kind of a truth not in observation, but a truth in the command of paint, the direct connection between the mind and hand through the properties of paint.